Shalom and good day all, this is Tehillim29 back again for another indie comic review. And in this indie comic review, I have E-Ratic Volume 2, or E-Ratic Recharged, to which we've got the return of Kare Andrews and a new artist working on his series. We have the Ninjettes, and last but not least, Blade in the Dark. So I'll get things organized and set up to cover the first comic that will be covered, and then I'll move into the other two comics, to which will be reviewed afterwards. So first things first, does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that's happening inside with the story? Sure enough it does, to which I give it a 8 out of 10. I'll now move to showing some of the internal art around the beginning, middle and end, as well as seeing some of the things that are happening story-wise with the characters, and are there any new characters? So as things begin with this story, we have Ollie, or Oliver, waking up with a bit of a dream, somewhat nightmare, and moving into a situation to which he's observing what his mother's doing. And of course, it's another one of those nights where she's come home drunk of sorts. As we start to jump towards the middle of the story, Oliver and some of his classmates go to a museum exhibit, and to which things get a little bit out of hand, and yes, he needs to get in the costume. And of course, there's his friend Kristen there. And after the event is taken care of at the Museum of History, we see his good friend Kristen, who he made in the last series, doing her own YouTube channel type thing, which is really cool. And she's happy that he's okay. And of course, we've also got a new character who's entered the scenario, who also ended up helping Ollie against the situation. So for the internal art, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Now to move into the story. Now, did we get any references to any of the previous runs or previous issues that have came out before this? No, we didn't, but is it really needed, seeing it's the beginning of a new story? I don't think it would matter either way, but this issue was still pretty fun to read through. Moving into the next area, we have the area of time, which showed in the story quite a few times. We had, of course, the time when Ollie woke up, which was around 2:28 a.m. We also had Ollie talking to Doc Peters, who is speaking about a countdown, to which this countdown is in relation to going down 68 hours. So who knows what's going to happen in these 68 hours and what it's actually connected to. Is it connected to Ollie? Is it connected to this person that he's met? What's actually happening in this world to which this countdown has started? Now, moving into the next thing, we have the location. We of course, Ollie's home, the bus for the bus trip, and the museum that they went to. The cast of characters consisting of John, Ollie, of course their mother, Casper, his brother, Doc Peters, the one who helped him in the last volume, or the last story. We had Jerome, Kristen, Garth, who was being picked on, Lena, Iana, I think it is, or Lana. It's either Lana or Iana. And of course, a big surprise towards the end, to which we end up meeting Ollie's dad. So I'm not too sure what's what's going to happen in the next issue. Who knows, maybe Ollie's dad might help bring a bit of a better routine in what's happening in his present life. We'll see what happens next. So the overall story rating for this, I gave an 8 out of 10. I'll now get things prepared for the next comic that will be reviewed. Alright, so now it's time to begin on the Ninjettes, which is something that's meant to have come out of the Jennifer Blood storyline through Dynamite. So moving into first things first, does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that's happening inside with the story? Yes and no, because we don't really get to see the beginning of somewhat this happening, so it's a bit of a false misnomer, to which I give it a 6 out of 10. I'll now go to showing some of the internal art in relation to the story, as well as some of the things that are happening story-wise, as we look around the beginning, middle, and of course the end. As we begin to move into this story, we've got a lot of crap happening here. And the way that this story is executed, I feel like that I can't even tell you what the hell's happening here. I get what they're trying to show, but its execution is not the best execution. As we move a little bit further into the story, we get more basically Gossip Girl. And last but not least, towards the end. And I really wish I could tell you what the hell is happening with this story. But because of how badly this story is written, yeah, you're soon going to find out what the rating is going to be for this. Now, for the internal art, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Now it's time to move in relation to the story. First things first, did we get any indication of what time that this is taking place? No, none at all. What about locations? Well, some of the locations that I managed to make out were, of course, the airport and the classroom. And last but not least, let's move into the cast of characters. Well, the cast of characters that I managed to get a grasp of was one by the name of Steph. Yeah, and the group of girls calling themselves the Ninjettes. And we really don't get to know any of the other cast in this. It's just really badly executed. Whoever did this needs to go back to writing basics. This should not be on shelf. This should be removed from the shelf. I get what they're trying to do here, but I don't think it was ready to be shelved. Because if it's one thing that I personally enjoy in my story writing, is number one, a clear and present understanding of what time it is taking place in the story. A clear and present understanding of the locations it's taking place, and a clear understanding as to, well, who all the characters are in the story, not just one. So for this should in its own way be recycle bound. I'll still give this, say, maybe the next couple of issues, and if I don't enjoy the next couple of issues, I'm dropping this series. I mean it. Don't get me wrong, Dynamite can get out some really good stuff. Sheena, of what I've read of Sheena, I enjoyed. What I've read of Jennifer Blood, I enjoyed. In fact, I think even with some of that, they got higher ratings than what I gave this. To which the rating for this, it got a 6 out of 10. That's just for the story. And yeah, this story needs to be redrafted and then put back on the shelf. And the editor to get this person in the gear again, because I didn't like this first issue. Unless the next couple of issues can gain me back into wanting to read this whole series, I don't know. Well, it's time to move on to, last but not least, Blade in the Dark. So now it's time to begin Blade in the Dark. First things first, does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that is happening inside with the story? Sure enough it does, to which I give it a 7.5 out of 10. And for something that's this one's first issue, that's a pretty good rating. That's a pretty good high rating to start off with. Now it's time to move into the internal art, as well as seeing what's happening story-wise. As we move into the beginning of this story, we have this main character here, to which we will learn his name a little bit later on, probably around the middle part. And he goes up against this ugly looking beast. And it almost reminds me a little bit like Cthulhu, even though it's not. Very interesting, and you do get a bit of a fight scene between the characters. As we start to move towards the middle of the story, he's catching up with a particular person who is sharing about one of the deities of this world, which is called the Musuku. And we also learn of Elandra. And last but not least, towards the end, to which they say goodbye to the main character, to which we learn his name is called Rook. In fact, we learned that a little bit around the halfway mark. And with that, that completes things for the internal art. Okay, for things internal art-wise, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. The art itself in the story almost reminded me a little of the story connected to Ninja Scroll, of all things. Just the way how the story was done, presented, even though it's not 100% Ninja Scroll-ish, it's its own story in its own world, and you definitely get that. Even with what you learn about the character, you do actually learn some things about the main character, which I really enjoyed, which was also shown through the artwork. So for the internal art, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Now it's time to move into the area of the story. Now, first things first, the way this address time was very different compared to, say, how other stories address time. Because it brought up 6 summers. And I thought, okay, that must be addressing sort of like 6 years in the past. So that became 6 years ago in the story. And then moving into the location, we get a bit of a village to which the character was sort of like overlooking, seeing burned, and then sort of like going past and out of the village. And then last but not least, we move into the cast of characters. Even though the cast of characters isn't very big, this story really brought a lot across for the first issue. My only criticism is that issue 2 isn't due out until 2023. That's my only criticism, because I'd like to read some more of this, especially the next issue, because this story has potential. You can definitely feel it's got potential. I don't really care that the art is in black or in black and white, but at least the story is understandable compared to the bloody Ninjettes. So, for the cast of characters, we have Rook, who you see there on the cover. Of course, that ugly-looking species thing that he ended up fighting in the story. We didn't really get any indication as to what that was. Of course, he ends up meeting somewhat a blind couple along the way, to which they have a bit of an influence on him as well, on sort of like giving him clarity, or a little bit more clarity on his pursuit for vengeance. And they let him know of the Musuku, the god who steals faces. And then there was Alandra. For the overall story rating for this, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Congratulations and well done, because I really enjoyed this story. Well, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.